Wow.
Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Maisres, God willing, making the Siyum today. We are learning Perikei Halacha Gimel. We're learning today Daf Mem Vav, and we left off on Daf Mem Hey Amid Beis, 11 lines from the top of the Amid. Before I share a few words of introduction for the Siyum, for today's Daf, just to suggest the following, that when we concluded in yesterday's share, the final version, Bishitas Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, regarding do we find squares in creation. And as we explained, that eagle, or something that's not square, is closer or is a greater manifestation of the infinite, right? A circle is infinite. A square is the limit. And the avoida, the ikar avoida, as we learn in Chassidus, is not for us to elevate ourselves, to go from the square to the circle, but the ikar avoida is to bring the circle down into the square, right? To make a dira lo yisbarach over here betachtoinim, which means that our main avoida is to take that which is already circular and to make it into a square, and to show how the godliness, even when squared, remains the same godliness. Now, on that note, when we have this final brayso that Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says that ba'icholin there is a nature meruba. So that stem of the mint, for example, or whether there's a certain tree trunk, that's fine. But it's only where do we not find the square? Ein meruba bebriyos. Ein meruba bebriyos is another indication of the higher, the more circular. I'm sorry. Yeah, the lower, the more limited. So from Doimim Sameach Chai Medaber, if you go in the opposite direction, even in the Chai, because of its Chayis, Beteva, everything is circular. The knee of the elephant, it's not a perfect square. It only looks like it's a square, but on the other side, it's rounded. But when you go all the way down to the Eicholin, there you have already Beteva, you have the concept of Meruba. It's an interesting concept. In other words, already when you go down to a lower place of reality, there you have already the mark of limitation. And that's why we find, as just as an example, that what gives chayas to a person, we get chayas from the tzemeach. We get life on some level even from mayim. In other words, that there is a necessary connection that we have to make even with the lower parts of creation. Either we have to make it into a meruba, or we already have a meruba, and there we have to bring the circular into the meruba. But this is a very significant discussion. The daf today will continue to identify the species that were mentioned in the Mishnah. That even though midrabanan, imported items, meaning plants, fruits, things that grew b'chutz la'aretz, when they are sold in the markets of the Holy Land, as a rule, the Chachamim said you have to remove trumas u'maisres because the buyer doesn't know that they grew b'chutz la'aretz, doesn't look correct. Items that were known to only grow b'chutz la'aretz don't even have to be tithe midrabanan. The Mishnah enumerated various species. The Gemara wants to clearly identify them, and from there, we're going to, as the Mishnah also spoke about the laws of maisres, and then the Mishnah went to the laws of shvius. All right, so the Mishnah says that these same items that don't have to be tithed, because we know that they grew b'chutz la'aretz, they are also not subject to the laws of shvius, and therefore you can buy them even from someone who's suspect to not keeping the laws of Shemitah. Now, the question that the Gemara will have is, when it comes to items that did grow in the Holy Land, but they are halachically considered non-food items, and as we learned, non-food items are not subject to maisres. That's the beginning of this Masech. That has to be oichel. Question is, are non-food items subjects to the isur of sfichei shvius? Now, sfichei shvius, I know there are those that hold that it's asen midoraisa, as it says, eis sfiach kitzir choloi sixer, but we just mentioned that most understand as sfiach kitzir choloi sixer means don't cut them kederach hakoitzrim. And the isur of cutting produce as the normal way isn't unique to sfichem, it's regarding all produce that grows. Even sfichem should not be cut But there is a rabbinic prohibition that even if there is an item that grew without it being planted, spontaneous growth, either it began to grow in the 6th year or product of the 6th year, some remnant remained in the ground and it began to sprout on the 7th year, product of the 7th year, even though it was not planted, midrabanan, we're not allowed to eat it. What was the gezeda? That someone might plant it on purpose and claim it grew by itself. Do we extend the Isur Sfichim to items that are halachically considered non-food? And we're going to get into that. There's going to be a beautiful differentiation in our daf between someone who's known to be chashud versus someone who we don't know whether they're neman. When it comes to this whole topic, like the Amaretz versus the Chaver. Chaver is someone who's known to be trustworthy in the laws of Trumas U'Maisros. That's the pshat of Chaver. What's pshat Amaretz? Normally, Amaretz is not someone that you know does not tithe. Adarabba. Even the Amaretz, Vadai took off Truma Gedoyla. Roiv Amaratzim took off everything. The Chachamim said there's too much of a minority, there's a too significant of a minority that don't do it all the way. Some they do, some they don't. So just to understand that generally when Chazal speak about a Am Ha'aretz, it's not pshat that you know that this person is not tithing. Because they are not trustworthy, we have to be suspect of them. Now, when we speak about the laws of Shvi'is, someone is chashud ala Shvi'is, someone is not chashud, we don't find the words Am Ha'aretz. Even though, by the way, the Rambam says that the chashud ala, the Am Ha'aretz, automatically includes chashud ala Maisris. The Rambam links the Am Ha'aretz from Maisris. Also, the same Am Ha'aretz is suspect to not properly keeping the laws of Shvi'is, which would mean that he doesn't allow his field to be hefker. He guards his field, which would mean that he does business b'peirei Shvi'is. That's normally the meaning. But the Gemara here is going to say that there is a difference between someone who you suspect, you don't know, you're choshid, versus someone that you know doesn't keep Shvi'is. And it's going to manifest in various details, as we'll have in today's daf. Final topic of the Mishnah, which will be the final topic of today's daf, which will be the siyum, is when the Mishnah made a one-liner. The one-liner is difficult to understand, so there was a lot that we added to it, and that is that number one, there is a rabbinic rule, Gidulei Truma Truma, which means that if something was designated to be Truma, and then it was planted, certainly the majority of items that disintegrate, it's called the Kalya Karna, that disintegrate in the ground, certainly those items on a biblical level, when they then provoke the earth to give forth a similar type of plant, that plant is tevel. It's not truma. Midrabanan, they said, if you planted truma, gedulei truma, the whole thing is truma. Gedulei truma, truma. The Mishnah concludes the way we learned pshat correctly, the way Rabbi Yochanan was megala harolim pshat in the Mishnah, that what happens if you have a seed, that the Mishnah spoke about seeds that are inedible. And because of them being inedible, they're not subject to truma. What happens if they became truma? Now, how can they be truma if they're not subject to truma? If something is not subject to truma just because you declared a truma, some people hold, if you declared a truma, the Chachamim said you have to behave with it, you have to be noyeg b'kedushas truma. That can be one scenario of the Mishnah, but better would be there are many seeds that begin edible. Like we learned about the turnip and the radishes. When you plant them initially, the bulb, which becomes the seed, is edible. Remember that when you replant it, at some point it becomes hardened. So if you had seeds that were edible, and while they were edible, and therefore they have to be tithed, you tithed them. And now some of them are truma. Then time went on, and they became completely hardened. That can be the case of the Mishnah. And now you planted them. So even though they are truma, but since you planted them at a time where they were exempt from being truma, in the case that I mentioned, they remain truma. But the rule gedulei truma doesn't apply to them. The rule gedulei truma, since the progenitor, the avihen, that's the way we're going to teach. We're going to read the words in the Mishnah. Since the source of the new plant is an item that, as it is now, doesn't have to be truma or meiser, even though it already is truma. But that which grows from it remains. I'm not going to use the word chulin because everything that grows is tevel. It goes to be like tevel, like any other thing that grows. That's going to be the final topic of the Masechta, as it was the final topic of the Mishnah. Chevra daf mem heyom at base, 11 lines from the top. And another item that the Mishnah spoke about, that one doesn't have to tithe, even though they're being sold in the Holy Land, because it's known, at least then, that these items, for whatever reason, were not planted and did not grow in the Holy Land. They are imported. So the Mishnah spoke about Adoshim HaMitzriyos, Egyptian Adoshim, lentils. So how do you identify them? So here we have Kavan with this picture. So the Gemara says, Kol shegalgeyam chadim, all types of beans, whose roundness, he's saying, is tapered to a sharp edge. So it gets a little bit sharp at its point. And it's not that it's not circular, but it's thin versus it being a lot more rounded. So you have to be a farmer to see too and to understand what the Gemara is saying. That is how you identify these lentils to be Egyptian lentils. And again, these lentils were not grown in the Holy Land and they never have to be tithed, not even midrabanan. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, that another way to identify Adoshim HaMitzriyos, Kol she'ein lahem tzeroiros. Normally, when you buy lentils, they have impurities in them. The ones that are called Egyptian lentils, they have no impurities in them. How ironic. You would think, right, that which grows in Mitzrayim, the erva sa'aretz, is filled with impurities. That which grows in the Holy Land should be free from impurities. But it doesn't work that way. It goes in the opposite direction. That dafka, where there's more kedusha, are you able to identify the impurities? Impurities is everywhere, right? As we have in the parsha of in this week and at Tzav, that dafka, when they had the fire was burning on the mizbeach, you know what the fire produces? Ash. Ash is impurity. How ironic, huh? You have a holy fire. You would think the greater the fire, the less the impurity. No, the more you burnt on the altar, the more ash you have. The more a person is holy, the more they will identify their ash. Goes in that direction. So in the Holy Land, because of the kedusha, you can identify greater impurity. Dafka b'chutzlar, it's because of the lack of kedusha, everything looks to be great. Not, there's no impurity, that's amazing. No, there's impurity everywhere. The fact that you don't notice it means you're living in Egypt. Gavalik. Okay, next. Elohem hakirikas, the next item mentioned in the Mishnah. So how do you identify this plant? Kol she'uktseim mu'utim, the stems, mu'utim, we're going to interpret to mean thin. And therefore, because of the thinness of the stem, which grows above the earth, from which you pluck them up, since they are thin, vehil kiteyan merubim. So the harvest, merubim, means it's very difficult. It's hard to take it out. Now, for some reason, first of all, I can say right now, the fact that Kavan didn't yet show a picture means he's lost. The Gemara also was lost. So after they gave that, it wasn't good enough. They still, with that, they couldn't identify this krikas. So they asked, Ma domila, what other plant is like krikas? What are you talking about? So Rabbi Yossi found, Rabbi Yossi, kigoin ilen kunyasa. Kunyasa is a type of cabbage that people were more familiar with, whose stem was thin. Therefore, it was difficult to harvest it. So once he spoke about to the oilam about the kunyasa, and they chapped what it means, then they understood what we're talking about, and they knew how to apply it to this kirikas. And we don't know where we're coming and where we're going. But that's nothing unusual. At least we know that we don't know where we're coming and where we're going. Okay. So after the Mishnah spoke about it doesn't have to be tithed, the Mishnah then said that all of these items, for the same logic, since we know that they did not grow in the Holy Land, Shvi is our laws connected to the Holy Land. These items don't grow there. So therefore, you can buy them from anyone, meaning even from someone who's suspect, who doesn't properly keep the laws of Shvi, which normally there's a rule you're not allowed to buy anything from someone who's chashud. These items you could buy. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yirmiyah boy, karkamin. Now, guys, karkamin I looked up. Karkamin, in English, it's called saffron crocus. It's one of the most beautiful plants in the world. It has these beautiful purple leaves. Kavan, wake up. Show a picture over here. And it has in it these red and yellow shtikalach coming out. It's mamish, it's like a butterfly. It's wondrous. Very good. Yeah, not the bottle.
Discount.
But just look at the flower. Now, just to know, this is a non-food item. But they would take whichever part is taken, they would grind it up, and that's the spice called saffron. Saffron. Saffron is very expensive. Okay, so karkamin, said he wanted to know Ma'u sheyu mutarim mishum sfachim. Again, as we mentioned in the intro, svichei shvius, something that was not planted, but it grew on its own. Midrabanan may not be consumed. Meaning, I just want to clarify, it might not be consumed. Svichei shvius cannot be consumed at all. That was the Gzeira. As a rule, non-foods are not included in the Gzeira of Svichim. That's basically his question. And therefore, it should not be included. Or it's not a food, but it's a spice. Maybe spice is considered a food. How do we classify the spice food? So Hasiv, Rav Tanchum, Bar Yirmiyam, even though normally Hasiv mean he asked, but that's normal. You asked a question, and I'm asking you, why did you even ask this question? You shouldn't have asked the question. Why not? Because V'hataninan, we learned, and we're quoting a Mishnah Mesechtes B'choros, that Hechashud ala Shvi'is, someone who's suspect of violating the laws of Shvi'is, he's not mafker his fields, he does business with Peiris Shvi'is, so ein loikchim imenu pishtan, you're not allowed to purchase flax from him under Shvi'is here, even if the flax was combed. Now, l'chu'ura, flax that's combed, that's the presumption, was only used for wood. Notice when you start a big fire, a big log doesn't catch fire. You have to begin by taking little splinters. So flax, even though people made the fiber out of it, but once it reaches the stage where it's combed, it's a non-food that has other usages. And it says in the Mishnah that even pishtan that's already combed, you still may not buy from a chashad ala shvius on the 7th year. Why? Because maybe the guy planted it. What does that prove? That even non-food items are included in the isur of svichei shvius, and that's a Mishnah. So of course, this saffron, this karkamin, should be also to buy from the chashad. Like what's your shaila? Fakert, non-food is included. So Amar Rabbi Chinana, you're wrong. I disagree with you. Pishtan is included, the Mishnah says, but do you know why Pishtan is included in the Isur of Shvichei Shvi'is? Mipnei Zaram. Because in this even combed flax, there are seeds could be edible. The seeds themselves could be edible. None of that beautiful saffron plant, none of it is edible. Some of it is going to be ground up. You'll make it into a spice, but that's not food. So Adarabba, you can't prove anything from there. Okay, the Gemara goes further. Rav Mana Amar, that if the pshat in the Mishnah over there in Bechayres, that doesn't allow you to buy pishtan, even saruk, from a chashut, if it's because of its seed, I got a problem with that. It's not going to work. Why? Because we learned another Mishnah in the same Mesechtes Bechayres, hechashud liyos moicher truma lochulen. This is not about shvius. Imagine someone who gets hold of truma and they sell it as chulin. Why wouldn't this guy just sell tevel? Maybe this is a guy that for himself, he doesn't want to eat tevel. So he separates truma, separates the maisrus. So whatever remains for him is kosher. And then he allows himself for money to sell truma to anyone. So someone who's suspect to do that, ein loichim yemenu, not even mayim umelach. Now mayim and melach, Islach, Meimar, Mayim, Umelach, Mepnei, Zaroi. There's no seeds in Mayim and Melach. And we already learned that Mayim and Melach, we just learned this in the Rambam, for example, may not be used to make an Eruv. It's not considered food, even though it's a necessity. But it's not something that's giving you nutrients. And why can't you even buy water from and salt from them? It has nothing to do with it being food or not food. Chazal made a penalty on someone who was allowing himself to sell, chazer treif as kosher. Don't buy anything from him. It's mishum knas. So l'cha'ira, the Gemara is saying, when you can't buy pishtan from the chashad al shvius, it's not about food or not food. It has nothing to do with that. And therefore, what is he coming to? It's because the guy's chashad al shvius, and the Chazal penalize such a person. If that would be the logic, then saffron should also not be bought from him, even though it's not food. It's not about it being food. That was not even a question.
Why not say just don't buy anything from them? But I'm confused. You're saying don't get salt and water.
Good, in other words, furniture you could buy from them. In other words, there's a limit to that. Very good. Let's go to the second Mishnah. If a person is selling food that's treif, as kosher, truma, as chulin, then Chazal say don't buy food from him. You're right. Chazal didn't say don't walk into his 4 cubits. Chazal didn't say don't buy tables from him. They limit it to food. Okay. When a person doesn't give his wife a get, then Chazal said don't do anything with him. It's no different. There are different violations and different penalties. Okay, so now we have, he asked the question and he has that approach. Says the Gemara, Menachem bar Mafsima. Look at these new Amiroim. Says, and who is this Menachem bar Mafsima? This is a new Amira. To know who he is, he's Achui de Yonis and Kippah. Yonis and the Yamalka, his brother. And they said, B'Shem Rav Ami, that no, Pishtan, yes, Nil Kachas Mikol Adam B'Shvis. Now, by the way, Amoraim don't have the power in the Bavli for sure not. In the Yerushalmi sometimes. But generally, you're not going to have an Amoira who's going against the mission. So when this Menachem, the brother said B'Shem Rab Ami, that no, you can buy Pishtan from someone who's chashud. And the logic would be because Pishtan, even though it has a seed, Pishtan is not viewed as food. So he had that hanacha, that non-food can be bought. So how do you resolve? How did Menachem learn the Mishnah? And now we're learning a new chiddush over here, like we spoke out in the intro. Zakti Gemara hadad teimar. Don't confuse buying something from someone, as the Mishnah said, the second Mishnah, that sells truma for chulin, or someone that you know doesn't allow others to enter his fields on shviz. Someone who's known to violate, on him there's a greater penalty. And then you have people that we don't know if they're keeping the laws or not. We even have a chashash that they're not keeping it. That's different. We make that chilik, hadad teimar, that b'she'eno yoideya im chashud huam eno chashud. Yes, a suspicion. We don't know for sure. Over there is where Menachem bar Mafsima said that you can buy pishtan. You're buying it from something that there is a suspicion, might not be keeping it. Okay, food don't buy, but something that not food you could buy. When the Mishnah says that it's asur, buddy, shu chashud, then when you know that this person is taken not keeping the laws of shviz, like in the other Mishnah, when you know someone was caught to be selling truma, God forbid, as chulin, treifa meat, as kosher meat, then it's asur. Then we mamash penalize them. Gavaldik. And like we mentioned, so now we have a big chilik between the concept of amaretz and chashud. At least sometimes. Sometimes chashud means the same thing, because by the word am haaretz never means that we know for sure that he doesn't keep. When you buy peitus from an am haaretz, you have to be ma'ased only demai. Only demai. You don't take off truma gedoyla. And even the demai, you take off the ma'aser rishon, but then you say, I don't have to give it to the Levi because I'm moitzi mechaver all of it, because there's a suffix. The whole am haaretz means it's a doubt. And sometimes when we find the words chashud, it means a doubt, but other times chashud means we know that this guy is not keeping it. He's a chashud al hashviz. Okay, which is great. Says the Gemara, that Zuga, another name, look at these names, Amayroim, who was Kireve, the relative that Rav Bar Zavda, said in the name of Rabbi Abo. Now, he was speaking about Bikya, look how it's spelled. Everyone here interprets Bikya differently. We're going to go with Bikya means vetch. We already spoke about vetch before. Vetch is a plant, very green. It's green and it's leafy, and it's primarily used for animal fodder. But during times of famine, we had this in this Masechta. During the times of famine, it's eaten by people. I don't know if it's a different name. I do know that that not everyone says. Look inside the Maraful, the last one in the Amud. Bika min yerek, and he says v'zaroi eino nechol. He doesn't say that the vegetable. He's saying that the seed is not eaten. So it's already different. And the Pnei Moshe B'chal didn't know. He just said min yerek. So whatever this bika. So he's saying that this bika is nilkachas mikol adam b'shvius. Now, guys, don't forget, we're coming back to our Mishnah. What did our Mishnah said? We're going with things that are not foods. Let's go with this topic. based on the Gemara, what the Gemara just said right now. Things that are not food are allowed to be bought even from a chashud, as long as we don't know vadai he's violating. Now let's see how this works with this statement of this zuga. Daf mem vav. Today is the final daf. This is about this bika. So you're telling me that what? That you can buy it mikol adam, which means even from a chashud. Amar Rabbi Yosi, have a problem. There is a mishnah. There is a braisa that elaborates a mishnah that lechoira doesn't say what you're saying, goes against what you're saying. Masnisa lo yom rokein. Now, before we get to the braisa, the kashas from the braisa. But before we get to the braisa, we're going to quote our mishnah. Our mishnah said that zera lufa elyon, seeds of this wild luf onion, zera kireshim, seeds of leek, zera betzalim b'chlal, seeds of onions, zera lefes utznoino, the seeds of turnips and radishes, and ushoor zeiroino gino she'enam nechalim. That's our mishnah. So remember, there were two dinim. Number one is the Mishnah says that seeds that are inedible are not chayiv to be tithed at all, and they could be bought from anyone on Shviz. Okay. Now on that, it says in a braisa on our Mishnah that elaborates, the braisa always gives more. Zera istis, seeds of woad, the zera koitza, seeds of matter, and here you have this word bikya. The zera bikya are also items that nilkachim mikol adam. Now, what's the problem? It sounds good. No, the fact that the Braisa says the seeds of bikya could be bought from any person, and that's the marafulda over there that he says that zaroi eino nechol is the charaya that bikya atzma, that the green part of this plant itself, Eloi may not be bought from mikol adam, may not be bought from a chashut. So we have a contradiction. And now the Gemara that now knows about differentiating the one who's vadai chashut and the one who's chashut. So now we're going to use that to resolve the same contradiction. That Dilma, perhaps, let's say the same thing. Dilma deloy isamart ela b'she'enu yedeyam chashut amela chashut. When did Rabbi say that bikya nilkachas mikol adam? Mikol adam means even though you don't know that this guy is keeping shvius. Okay, so let's say he would be the one that we normally call a chashud. We don't know. We have a suspicion. You can buy even the green from him. But when we have in the braisa, I'm sorry, if I get the implication, right? Yeah. But when we have the implied law from the braisa that only the seed of the bikya could be bought, even from the guy who you know is chashud. But bikya, you may not buy it from someone who's known to violate shvius. Again, someone who's known to violate shvius, there is a greater penalty not to buy anything from him in the universe of foods, in the universe of food, even though it's not mamashoichel. Hadavar bari shu chashud. That's great. The marafulda middle of the Amid, 12 lines from the top. Dilma, in other words, now you can get Gavaldik. Now we have a whole new mahalach over here. Shaloy yisamar the bikya atzma muteres likach. When do we say that? What does that mean? Hainu mistam b'nei adam. Stam b'nei adam means she'ein anu yoidim shucha. We don't know that there's a problem. We don't know the guy to be religious. We don't know the guy is not religious. Avalin bevadai chashud lo yomer ababo. The af mi chashud muter. Adar abba no. Then mi chashud asur. It's amazing, but even from that guy, even from the guy who's known to be chashud, zera bikya you could buy. And Kavan, why? Because zera bikya is not food. Because even penalizing these people, what's shvius? It's about food. It's about food money. They were working the land, getting more produce, selling the produce, not allowing people. It's about money that people make in the Nisayan that is connected to kashrus achila. So there we only penalize achila. Gabal.
Is veg human food?
So what we did learn before is that veg has to be tithed because since during times of famine, and if I'm not mistaken, it's only midrabana.
But it's usually food for animals, correct?
That's veg. That's why the art school went with the veg. It's better to understand it. Or we don't know what vegetable it is. Zera lufa elyon. Again, we just had these words, what we just quoted from our Mishnah, when the Mishnah is speaking about that which may be bought from anyone on Shviz, even from someone who's this chashud, meaning b'she'eno yodeya im chashud or ye'eno chashud. So says the Gemara, Keni Masnisa, the real pshat of the Mishnah is zera hasilyon shaluf, that Zera luf ha'elyon is not any luf. And what's elyon? He's speaking about, and see, he doesn't have the word elyon, that there is a certain species of luf called silyon. And the Mishnah calls that elyon. In other words, that is the type of seed that's completely inedible. And I want people just to appreciate what we're going to have right now, because it's going to be a very deep ending of the Gemara. Go back to the Mishnah, to Halacha Gimel. Halacha Gimel is going to be on Daf Mem Dalit. And I want you to see how there was a letter here that's very problematic. Even to see the advantage and disadvantage of us learning the Zohar or learning from the Art Scroll is that we don't struggle with the challenge of the understanding. We right away go to the understanding. But when the Mishnah, guys, look on Daf Mem Daled Amud Aleph, back in the Mishnah. So the second to last law of the Mishnah was, we just mentioned, Zera Lufa Elyon, Zera Kireshim, Zera B'Tzolim, right? Zera Lefes Utznoinois, Usha'ar Zeiroi Negino She'enem Necholim, P'turim and Amaisris, because they don't have to be tithed because they're not Oichel. And again, Vinil Kachim Ikoladam B'Shviis. Now, look at the words. The word shin makes it sound that this is an explanation for that. Right, Rab Shloima? Sha'af al pi shaviyam truma harei yochelu. If, first of all, many people hold, you look over here in the Noise Kalim, that the shin is a mistake. It has to be a vav. Even with the vav, it's a new din. But when people read the Mishnah, many people, including the Amoraim, did not understand what this Mishnah meant unless they had a teacher. We already knew that what? First of all, what does the word avian mean? So we said that the Mishnah ends, end. And now there's a new din, a new law. What's the new law? First of all, you have to know Gduli Truma Truma. Right? That's what the older Noise Kalim say. And then we're speaking about the seed that is Truma. Now, how is it B'chlal coming over here? So now that the Mishnah mentioned items that are Peturim in Amaisres, now that the Mishnah mentioned those items, now the Mishnah wants to speak about if one of those items were declared to be Truma, or one of those items, while they were still edible, were taka properly designated as Truma. All of this is not written. And then you planted it. So the Mishnah is being Machadesh that even though normally Gedulei Truma, V'af al pi she'avihen truma, avia means the progenitor. Avia means the seed. That, the cause and effect. The cause is the seed. The effect is the plant. If you planted a seed of truma, even though the father is truma, and gedulei truma, but since we said in the Mishnah right now, at least that's the shin, that really things that are inedible don't have to be tithed at all. So because of what we learned before, it's a very far-fetched shin. Based on what we learned above, now we're going to have a consequence. Since an item that is not edible doesn't have to be tithed, if you planted it, we don't say gedulei truma. Harei elu de gedulim yeyochelu. Now that you know this is pshat, shkoyach, but you'll see that it wasn't so clear that this is the pshat. And we're going to have a story about that. Says the Gemara, chada ita. In the Bavli, it's called Itza, a woman. Here it's an Ita. There was a woman. And Havala Yarbuzim de Truma Goy Ka Kipata. She had seeds of sorrel, of Truma, in her head covering. Right? Das Moshe is that a married woman in public has to cover her hair with a hat. Then you have Das Yehudis to cover it completely and even indoors, but Jewish women covered their hair. So this woman was wearing a hat, and she had seeds of truma that were, and just to know, sorrel, I saw a picture. Sorrel is also very leafy green that has like a lemon flavor.
We have it here, yeah.
You have it here?
I have that in my house, yeah.
Now I want you to know that the seeds are inedible. The leaves are edible. The seeds are inedible. And she had seeds in her hat. You know, they say this story, this great story, that a chassan just got married. And first Pesach by the Shver and Shviger, the first time, and they served him soup. And he looks into a soup aviv, and you know what he finds in a soup? A kernel of wheat. You know what a kernel of wheat means? First of all, a kernel itself can be chametzdek, because if the kernel cracked and it got rained on, the kernel is already chametz. Even if it didn't happen, if a kernel falls into water, we don't want kernels around. So he looks into the soup and he finds a kernel of grain. So right away, what goes on in his mind? That he married into a family that they're not that kosher. There were horrible feelings. He couldn't take it. So the next day he went to the Rav and he told the Rav what the terrible thing that he just discovered, that the shviger doesn't keep kosher. So the Rav told him, take a look in your shtreimel. And in the shtreimel, the week before when he got married, there's a minig Yisrael that you throw. Today you throw candy. It used to throw grain when you get called to the Torah. So they threw grain on him and a shtickle thing got stuck in the shtreimel. So he chapped, that's all of us, that the chametz came from him, not from her. So that's what happened. So she had a yarbuz, and then he felt good. See, once it's from me, I don't feel angry with me because I don't do that. I only feel angry with you. Havalo yarbuz and the truma goig kipata. So she had these seeds in her hat, and what happened was naflon leginsa. It fell from her hat into a garden, and they sprouted. They happened to be truma. Now, what would these seeds of truma doing? I have no idea. But this is mamish the case of the Mishnah. In other words, everyone knows geduli truma. If you don't know how to learn pshat in the Mishnah, you don't know there's an exception. So he went also uvda kumi Rabbi Yechanan. They came. The Rav was Rabbi Yechanan. He heard about what happened, and he paskined that all of the new sorel is fine. It's normal tevel. We don't say geduli truma. That was his big psak. So Amalei Rabchia Barva. He was not upset. Why did we need you? This is. There are times, I want to make it clear, when you go to a Rav and you ask a Rav, what bracha do you make on a coffee? And he says, you make a shahakal. You're not going to be upset with the Rav. He wasn't being machadash anything. But sometimes when you ask a shayla and the Rav says, oh, this is a big shayla, let me think. And he makes a big to-do and he gives a psak. It seems like this story was like Rabbi Yochanan made a chiddush. And Rabbi Chia Bava, when he heard it, he says, for this, I need a Rabbi Yochanan. It's no big thing over here. You can't get it right. If you say something wrong, they say you made a mistake. If the rabbi gets it right, they tell him, what, I needed you for that. You're making up sachidish. Okay, you know, Aleph Beis. You know our Mishnah. And he quoted the words in the Mishnah. And Rabbi Yochanan heard that critique. And I'm going to read the words when we make the actual siyum, but he told him something very deep. On the bottom of the sea, there are certain flat stones that look like shards. And under them, you have pearls. And there are certain people that they are deep divers. Now, normally a deep diver, what does a deep diver do? He's going to get the pearls. So he does the whole avodah by himself. He goes down there and he gets it and he goes back up. Certain people want for others to participate in. Certain people want for others to feel like they also are accomplishing something. But the other people are unable to know which stone has to be lifted up, which barrier has to be removed. So this great diver, you know what he does? He goes to the deep sea. He only removes the covering of the pearl. Now that the pearl is exposed, and a chanami, anyone can go and take the pearl. And the person who took the pearl, what might they think? I did the whole avodah. But they should understand that the only reason why they were able to see the pearl is because someone came before them and took away something that never would have allowed you to see it. So what Rabbi Yochanan was answering, it was not directly, it was this critique that Rabbi Chia Barva made that, well, I need you, Rabbi Yochanan, it's a Befedish Mishnah. He says, no. He says, once I learned, I was Megala how to learn Pshat in the Mishnah. I removed obstacles. And actually, it's such a beautiful derech and avodah that, you know, that's the best help we can give to the other. Not to foon speed the other, because then that person will never have any feeling of accomplishment if everything is done for the other. But if the other needs help, so what your help should be is remove an obstacle, but leave the other to do the work. I can even argue when it comes to Mashiach. What did the Rebbe do? The Rebbe removed the obstacles. And then he says, and now we all have to bring Mashiach. So we're partners in it. And if you actually accomplish something, then to ignore the fact that people came before you and they removed obstacles that without their removing of an obstacle, you never would have done what you did. And to take all the credit, that's foolish. So now that they read the Mishnah, they didn't know how to teach the Mishnah. Rabbi Yochanan went through the avodah of Yegia and being Megala what Rebbe meant. Now that he touched the Mishnah, now everyone knows how to touch the Mishnah. So when we read it now, we know what it means. Yeah, then and once he did that part of the work, and Hanami, now anyone by learning of the Mishnah can paskin to that woman's case that the seed that sprouted, avian means the progenitor, and it is speaking about a seed that's inedible, that is truma. And now this also makes sense because what happened over here in the sorrel, the leaf part of the sorrel is edible. So what happened was someone had sorrel and they separated truma. So the seed is nished. It's just a seed. So now that the seed got planted, even though that it was truma, now what was this sorrel doing in her hat? I have no idea.
Was he asking why he didn't quote the Mishnah?
That will be one way of understanding it. I think that it sounds like Rabbi Yechanan gave a psak as a chiddush. He came with a novelty. Or Danny, you might be right. Like just say a Mishnah Mefureshes. And it's not a Mishnah Mefureshes because if you read the Mishnah, you wouldn't understand the Mishnah this way. And the greatness of Rabbi Yechanan was that it's a much greater accomplishment to remove the obstacle. Lahavdil in Brazil as a soccer player. When the guy makes the goal, you think that guy should get the credit. It's all the other guys that got all the obstacles out of the way. Everything is open. You kick the ball in the goal, and who do they pick up? They pick up the guy that kicked the ball in. That's what they go. Don't pick up that guy. That guy had the easiest job. Unless they're Brazilian and they make the ball go crooked. I'm saying, but many times you see that. The finisher, we're making a siyum. Lav Dafke is the one that did the greatness. Everyone has their part. Sometimes to finish it is the easiest thing in the Vaharaya. We're going to bring Mashiach. What, we're greater than the people before us? No, they were much greater than us. They did the hard work. They removed the obstacles. Now the goal is open. Now we got to kick the ball in the goal and bring Mashiach Tzidkenu. Guys, a big mazel tov. And God willing, tomorrow morning we're starting a new Masechta by Sheni.